Planet of the Apes started with a novel from French author Pierre Boulle in 1963. 5 years later, that novel got adapted into the first Planet of the Apes movie. Over the span of 6 years after that, 5 movies were made. Audiences and critics were quite pleased with the film, at least with the first one. Then it kind of deteriorated. There was also a 10-episode series that got turned into 5 subsequent movies with 2 of those episodes each. So there's a plethora of content in the Planet of the Apes franchise. There's also a television series. There was the remake from Tim Burton in 2001. There were the 3 movies in the 2010s. And now we have arrived in the kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, something that we talked about on this week's podcast. And now I want to talk about the franchise as a whole. This week, I was able to sit through all 10 films in a sort of long binge. And Lachlan, for you watched them for the first time, at least the original 2010s trilogy that we now can call already an original because it feels like they're already classic by how beloved they are. So Lachlan, for you who's only seen like 4 of them now, do you feel like you have cracked the formula on why this franchise is so successful and keeps coming back?
Well, it's a funny thing that you say that to me because I had only watched Rise of the Planet of the Apes prior to this year. I watched Dawn and War this year for the first time, and it's funny I watched it because I actually struggled to watch Dawn a few years ago, which is why I never watched any of the original stuff from the 60s and 70s, and why I didn't watch the Tim Burton stuff, because if I couldn't make through a modern War, Planet of the Apes, or Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which were highly regarded in comparison to sort of the aging of the old ones, there was no chance I was going to watch the old stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
now that I have sat through Rise, War, and Dawn, or Rise, Dawn, and War this year, and now Kingdom, and I'm quite positive on all of them. I'm not really negative on them in any kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
I think I should go back and watch them, and hearing your thoughts on them, I guess it's a bit of a hit and a miss, and I feel like there
Yeah.
are good elements, bad elements to them, just like any series that has 10 movies. I mean, what's another film series that has 10 things? I mean, I guess we could consider Lord of the Rings as 10 things. Harry Potter has 10
Yeah.
plus things in it at this
Mm-hmm.
stage. There are highlights, there are lowlights, but
Yeah.
overall, you could probably find a positive thing about them. But yeah, tell me what you think.
I think this franchise has been able to stick around so long because it has adjusted to what audiences expect. I think what you definitely know is the ending of the first one, with the Statue of Liberty, and then you've also seen the ending of the Tim Burton one, where it's Abraham Lincoln instead of Abraham. Pretty funny pun that they do visually there, which I enjoyed. It's probably the best. It's by far the best part about this film, which is otherwise pretty lackluster. But like this franchise has been in development hell for a while after like 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, when finally that Tim Burton remake came out. That one probably didn't succeed. I think it's just, especially because Matt Reeves has done such a great job of revitalizing this franchise. When the first one, you're gonna see a lot of like talking being done in especially the first Apes movie is basically just them yapping at each other the whole time, which is fine if you're ready for that. But as a modern cinema goer, I don't think we're really ready for the amount of talking that happens in older films where concepts aren't really shown because that's harder to do. You don't have the capabilities, and we've so grown collectively as like a cinema audience towards show don't tell, and it's something that pretty much like a lot of people know that maybe even not even casual cinema goers, show don't tell. This modern franchise has been able to do more action and splice in like the ideological stuff and all of that in between, and I think it's a really neat little sandwich, and it's a bit more bare bones when you go back, but the foundations for all of it is still there. And I assume, I haven't read the original novel, but I assume it's also already there, and it just makes for an interesting dilemma of like, hey, who's the dominating force on Earth? And when it's not humans, what would that look like for us if it's another species from Earth? And that's just an intriguing concept that they continue to deliver on.
Compared to the whole aliens invading and
Yeah,
out of this world.
because
What
it's
It's a
more
very
about
interesting
us.
concept, and the themes are always violence cycles and
Yeah.
the inhumanity of our actions. Like it's a really interesting play, especially we evolved from a
Mhm.
species of apes, and they're essentially a very distant cousin. And what would happen, right? It's really
Yeah.
hard to tell, but it's a
Mhm.
very clear example. Now you've seen the original stuff, and I haven't, and they're all linked together, aren't they? Technically,
Uh,
in a timeline wise, the original
yeah.
stuff from the 60s, 70s is actually into the future of where the current day films are set. Correct?
Sorta, kinda. There's also another Caesar in the fifth and fourth film. So I feel like they have a split reality when it comes to the 2010s remake of it all, but they're technically not connected. They go a different route about it. Essentially, the way that they go in the original is that Caesar is it's not it doesn't really make sense when you think about it too much, but essentially like apes developed into being the dominated species, right? And they time travel back in one of them to the 70s, and then they tell them that they're going to be the dominating species. One of them is pregnant, has a kid that's going to start a revolution because they know where the future is going to lead, but it only becomes like that because their kid is there. So if they hadn't traveled back in time, they wouldn't have become, I think, the dominating species, maybe. I don't know. So with
Right.
that, I'm not that into the logistics of time travel to like figure out
Copy
if that
that.
makes sense or not. And it's way different. I think it's done so much cleaner in this new version where it makes more sense that humans are experimenting on them. And it's way more like to the detriment of the humans just being their own cause of why this is happening, which they are in the original as well. They're just more ignorant and 70s about it. And this new one, it's a bit more modern the way that they go about it. So I think it's a split universe, but the way where we're at right now, we're still in a prequel to the original from the 60s.
Right.
Yeah.
So the reason I was asking about that, because obviously you spoke about how the originals have a lot more talking, and I guess that's what an
Yeah,
audience would prefer back then is a lot more
definitely.
talking and dialogue in comparison to it's annoying to say, but some people don't like reading subtitles when apes are signing, and you have to
Mhm.
read to what they're saying, and I don't think. I think one of the interesting things is how it's evolved, and I don't think it. The reason I think they couldn't make it is they needed a lot more emotion from Apes. Now, I haven't seen the
Mhm.
original stuff, and you said the makeup is pretty damn good, but I'm going to assume that
It's
you
not going to,
can't
not,
get
no.
subtle facial expressions that you do on the live
They're
action
good
stuff that we're getting
reaction
with the motion
gifs.
capture.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
good reaction
so
gifs because they usually have
they're
their mouth
very over the
open. Like,
top. So that's fair.
I think the lead characters that we get is mainly Cornelius and Dr. Zira, I think is her name in it. Yeah, those two are like our leads for the first three films, to apes, chimpanzees, and it's I don't know, they are very corny, and I think that their characters aren't great. They're just kind of used as a vehicle for the story. And so much different with Caesar because he has so
Mm.
much more depth. It's a way different thing. They're wholly different. You can't really compare them. But they still hold something like worth for the franchise. It's different enough that it just doesn't feel like we are rehashing the same thing because we can jump into different parts of this universe, and the dilemmas are always difficult. That's why they're intriguing, and there's always stories to tell. I feel like that's why, like, if you go back and you do a redo a horror film, and it's the same thing of like something unleashes, it kills a bunch of people, it needs to be contained. In the next one, it's going to break out again. It's going to feel stale. That's why like we are growing tired of some remakes and rehashes of a franchise. With this one, you have so many entry points that it stays fresh, and I think that's why it's still so successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I think that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts. Again, I have the whole rank list of the whole franchise linked below here. Lachlan, for the four films that you've seen, what would your ranking be like?
Mine would probably go in the order of Dawn, Kingdom, War, Rise.
Yeah, that sounds good. I can agree with that, and I do have a couple spliced in from the older ones there. So definitely a franchise worthy of revisiting or visiting for the first time. Even if you haven't seen the other films, I think Kingdom is another great entry point for this. So let us know what you've seen, what your ranking is of the franchise, and what you thought about this latest one in the comments below. And again, we talked about Kingdom a bit more extensively on our podcast in the spoiler review. Go check that out if you're interested. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Bye.